It's on.
I'm Alita Williams, and I am president of the Rotary Club of Chicago, and I would like to convene the 5,668th meeting of our club. And I'm going to bring up Laura Inns, who is not up today. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Sarah. I feel like they need to sit it down. Good afternoon. All right, thank you, everybody. Before I answer this, you know me and my thought today, several books I have in the last give and take. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this book. I only read 1 to 2 books a year. This has taken me a very long time. But I finally recently got to the part I was waiting for. This book talks about people who are givers, people who are takers, people who are masters in the professional setting. But part of what it says is statistically, the people who are givers are the top performers and the bottom performers. And the part I was waiting for is, what makes the giver the bottom versus the top? Because I imagine that some people in this room, being Rotarians, are givers. And it's very interesting that the #1 difference between those at the top and those at the bottom is a degree of self-interest, selfishness. So the givers who are giving, but also are concerned with the degree of their own success and a little bit more self-aware, they do better. The givers who apparently don't value themselves at all and have this selfish instinct, those are the ones who really end up at the bottom of their professional careers and other things. So, if anybody has ever felt guilty for being selfish, this is your reason to feel proud. It makes you a better giver, and you're able to give back to the world better when you feel proud. That is my thought of the day. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Okay, so for our speaker today, we will do our best to get to our Zoom questions. Please honor everyone's time and be succinct with your questions, 1 question per person. We will take questions from in the room first, and then we will get our questions on Zoom. Please put them into the chat box. And at this time, I would like to ask Eric Temple to come up and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Leah. So, as you know, our programs group always tries to bring you a wide variety of different kinds of topics so that you can learn something different and new every Tuesday. And I think today's presentation is a little bit perhaps more up my alley in the sense that we're going to be learning about the economics of steel production, which to me is very interesting, and I think should be interesting to all of you as well, and sort of how that works, you know, in terms of international trade and tariffs and so forth. And so the person who's going to be presenting on that today, Scott Buehrer, is a Rotarian from Wabash, Indiana. He's also the president of B. Walter and Company, a manufacturer of fabricated metal products established in 1887 in Wabash, Indiana. He began his manufacturing career in Luxembourg at a company that was Europe's largest, one of the largest steel producers. And that company now is part of a larger company that is the 2nd largest steel producer in the world. Scott's 40-year business career includes management positions in R&D, engineering, sales, marketing, and operations of several manufacturing companies where steel is the primary raw material. Scott has a master's degree in mechanical engineering from Stanford, an MBA from Duke, and is a former McKinsey Company management consultant. And last summer, he testified before the U.S. International Trade Commission on how Section 232 steel tariffs have damaged U.S. manufacturers that use steel to make their products. So let's give a warm welcome to Captain.
It's a real pleasure to curate this first Rotary Club. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm sorry that I'm kind of bandaged up. I wasn't doing a very good looking. But I will try to be interesting. Hopefully you'll spend more time looking at my slides. So the title of this talk, Macroeconomics and Manufacturing Trade Deficit. That sounds kind of
Speaking to the mic. Speaking to the mic.
I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. Yes, okay. So I know that the topic sounds kind of boring, but really it's quite fascinating. I'm going to talk about three things. What is driving the trade deficit in manufactured goods in the United States? How did we get this steel tariff during the Trump administration? What was the motivation for doing that? And how did that play out for industrial manufacturers? And also, how did it affect the American consumers? At a high level, those are the 3 points that I'd like to cover. Last year's trade deficit in manufactured goods was $1.2 trillion. Okay, to give you a perspective of what $1.2 trillion is, if you went around and bought farmland for $10,000 an acre, you could literally buy off last year's trade deficit enough land that's equal to 3.1 times the size of the state of Illinois. All right, that is also equivalent to almost one county a day of Illinois being transferred over to foreigners. So this is a very serious issue for our country. And we need to understand what's driving this. Why is this occurring? Is it because China's a currency manipulator? No, I don't think that's the reason. And so I'm going to explain that. Okay. By the way, the market cap of crude oil, which is known also today as Alphabet, is 1.6 trillion. I think I would prefer to own 3.1 times the state of Illinois in land than own crude. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm going to talk about macroeconomics first, and then I'll go into the trade deficit in the steel tariff. I was fascinated by economics, although my degrees are in engineering. I've taken a lot of economic courses because I really wanted to be an econ major, but I fell in love with engineering too. In econ, by the way, we had three recent presidents that were econ majors: Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, and Donald Trump. They were all econ majors in college. You can't help when you're an econ major to take a course in macroeconomics. It's a required course. If you take macroeconomics, you have to learn these two formulas. The GDP of a country is equal to consumption plus investment plus all government spending plus exports minus imports. That's called the expenditure approach. This is not a theory. This is a mathematical formula, like 2 plus 3 equals 5. GDP is also equal to consumption plus savings plus taxes. That's why the income approach. If you get $1, you can spend it, you can save it, or you can give it back to the government. Talking to elementary teachers, they tell me that using 5th grade math, you can set these two formulas equal to each other, and if you move some things around, you get M minus taxes, which is imports minus exports. That's the trade deficit, is equal to all government spending minus taxes plus private sector investment minus savings. Now, the takeaway on this slide is if you're growing the state and local government, typically try to run a balanced budget. If the federal government is driving up the trade deficit, the government deficit, then you're going to have to steal money out of the private sector, or you're going to drive up the trade deficit. Okay, so that's the takeaway from that slide. So let's look at. If we take a look at the federal government deficit, what you see here is that during the Obama years, the government deficit went down. Okay? During the Trump years, the government deficit went up. Now, it was going up even before COVID, and then the COVID spending really caused the federal deficit to really skyrocket. And it's been trickling down to about the equivalent of about 1.5 trillion a year under the Biden administration. So if you then take that into consideration, and we're going to move on to the trade deficit, what you find is that during the about a year, this is the trade deficit by month for the United States going back to 1995. And so we really had improvement here in the trade deficit during these Obama years. And then during the Trump years, you had a deterioration in the trade deficit because of particularly the COVID spending. And so the important takeaway here is what's going on with the government credit card in terms of taxes and spending has a big factor. It's a big factor behind what's going on with the trade deficit. And if we don't rein in these $1.5 trillion deficits that we're having, we're going to continue to manufacture large trade deficits because we literally have to be importing capital from outside the United States to support all this extra spending that's not being supported by wealth generation or income. Okay. Now let's talk about the Section 232 steel tariff. This was the mechanism by which previous administration put a steel tariff in place. There's a perspective here. This is our factory in Wabash, Indiana. Wabash, by the way, is the first electrically city in the world. This is the sightline. And we have about an 80,000 square foot factory. I purchased this factory about 6.5 years ago from the fourth generation family. And our input items is steel. So we get steel in coil form, and wire form, as well as sheet form. And basically, the steel mills generate this. They sell it to what's called a value-added distributor, who will then cut it to size for what we need in our factory, and then we turn it into a car. And we use about 2 semi-truck loads of steel a week. Okay, if this chart here shows steel production around the world, and what jumps right out at you is that China, this goes back to 1970, or 1965, all the way to 2020, and what jumps at you is just how much steel China produces. They produce over half of all the steel in the world. Today in the U.S., we are producing about 1/3 less steel than we did back in the 1960s. And there you can see our bar in this kind of blue color. So that's a phenomenal amount of steel that China produces because they have been developing their economy at an accelerated rate over the last 20 years. What's interesting is 80 to 90% of the steel that's produced in China stays in China. So it's not like they're dumping steel around the world. They need the steel to build the buildings and expand their economy. If you look at 2017, and this was the year before the steel tariff was imposed, we produced in 2017 about 75% of all the steel that we needed in the U.S. The other 25% of the steel came from 70 different countries. You would think that China must be the largest exporter of steel to the United States. No, that wasn't the case. They were actually ranked number 10 out of 70 countries that we need steel from. Why? Because most of the steel in 2017 was already being tariffed and had anti-dumping duties on it. So consequently, very little steel came into the U.S. directly from China. On the other hand, Canada and Mexico were large exporters of steel to the U.S. because they had very little in the way of tariffs and anti-dumping duties on their steel. So now let's talk about the Section 232 Trade Expansion Act. Coming out of World War II, the government realized that in times of war, we need our resources or commodities to fight battles with. And so they gave the president the ability to put a special tariff in place if there was concerns about not having enough of that material. And all it required was the Secretary of Commerce to say, we need the tariff, and the President sign off on this. This is a very rarely used authority that the President has. In fact, the last time it was used prior to President Trump using it was in 1982. Okay, the case for using this on steel really wasn't there because only 3% of the steel produced in the United States is used by the military. So using this as a basis of putting tariffs on steel really didn't make any sense. When President Trump started talking about the steel tariff or doing something to help the steel producers, there was enormous pushback from business leaders, economists, literally everybody except the steel producers. Why? Because in 2002, President Bush put a special tariff on steel, and we lost a lot of manufacturing jobs. I actually have a slide on this. There was no support from economists. The University of Chicago surveyed the 41 top economists in the United States. Not a single one of them said this would be good for the U.S. The National Taxpayers Union sent a letter to President Trump signed by 1,000 economists, said, please don't do this. The business community came out, like some of the groups, for example, with the American Institute of Architects, the National Marine Manufacturers Association, U.S. Chamber of Commerce. They said, please don't do this. We've been down this road with President Bush. We've lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs. Don't do this. And as I said before, the legal basis was weak, and there was concerns about starting a global trade war. President Bush experience with putting a tariff in. He used a different mechanism. It was going to be a 3-year program, and after roughly 2 years, we lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs. And also a case in front of the World Trade Organization, and the rest of the world was starting to retaliate by putting tariffs on our products. So the Bush administration backed down. They stopped the tariff. And this was a mini version of what President Trump did, because President Trump put tariff on all steel from all countries, whereas President Bush only put it on certain steel from certain countries. So Trump got this was a doubling down. So how did we get the steel tariff? In fact, if you look at up to this point in my presentation, you have to say to yourself, this makes no sense at all. History's not on our side, the business community's not on our side, the economists are not on our side. And as usual in life, when it doesn't make sense, you're missing a key piece of information. So my next slide captures what that piece of information is. And from talking to business groups around the country for the last 3 years, I can assure you that less than 1% of America knows what I'm about to say. The Trump steel tariff, also known as Section 232, actually began with the Taj Mahal Casino. When Trump took over the Taj Mahal Casino, within a year, he could not pay off the banks, and they were set to foreclose on him. The banks hired Wilbur Ross, Trump's future Secretary of Commerce, to work on a deal. Now, there were some personal guarantees I believe that Trump had made in order to do the Taj Mahal Casino. And so he was facing personal financial ruin. Wilbur Ross stepped in and said, you got to save this guy. He convinced the banks to write down the interest rate, relieve Trump of any personal guarantees on the debt, in exchange for keeping Trump in control and taking an equity position in the casino. So 2 years later, they went through round 2, that took Trump out completely, but he was saved personally. Wilbur Ross then moves on. He's known in New York City as the king of bankruptcy, because he's a bankruptcy workout specialist. 10 years later, he bought bankrupt steel mills in the United States. He bought Bethlehem Steel, I'm sure we've all heard of that company. LTD, a third company, and within a 3-year period, flipped them, like somebody would flip a house, and sold them to Mittal, which is now ArcelorMittal. ArcelorMittal was, I don't know if they still are, headquartered inside the old ARBED headquarters in Luxembourg, which is my first employer in manufacturing, where I would go every day to lunch. Well, after Wilbur Ross sold his steel mills to what became ArcelorMittal, they put him on their board of directors, and that's where he sat until Trump became president, where he tapped him the head of the Commerce Department, signed off on the steel tariff, and then Trump signed it into law, and there we go. So, the swamp is alive and well. Okay? And, my only beef with politicians is, why can we not be honest with the American people? Why can we not say, look, we all do things for our friends. Wilbur's my friend. I want to do something for him because he helped me. Wouldn't that go over real well with the credibility with the voting population in America? You just tell them to forget. Okay, so how has this worked out? Well, as you might guess, it's been a disaster because the case wasn't there, and this was backroom politics. It wasn't for the best interest of the American people. So it's going to be bad. The question is going to be, how bad is it? And it's historically terrible. What happened was the steel tariff started a trade war, and that trade war resulted in U.S. manufacturing going into a recession pre-COVID. Steel mills started shutting down in the U.S. in 2019, a lack of demand caused by a trade war that was started by steel tariffs. Then in 2020, the steel mills had even less confidence when COVID came along, so they shut some more mills down. Some of these mills are never reopening again. Then the government rains money down. People aren't going in the service sector. They're not traveling. They're not going to restaurants. They're buying stuff and building stuff. So now we need steel, but we shut steel mills down, and we're importing less steel. Okay? What a beautiful picture that is. You can imagine what happened to the price. The demand for steel is through the roof, but we're importing less steel. We're making less steel. Now the price is going through the roof. And what do the steel mills do with these egregious profits? They give it to their shareholders with stock buybacks, not building additional steel mills. Now, we are going to get an increase in steel production in a few years, but we've gone through a tremendous amount of pain, and we're still living with this tariff. This chart shows the manufacturing index, purchasing managers index of manufacturing activity. Below 50 is a recession. So it shows, as I was saying, in 2019, you see that dip below 50 just before COVID. That was a 10-year low. Then we had the COVID drop off, then the government rained down all this money. So now manufacturing is through the roof. That fueled inflation because we have commodity shortage, lumber, steel, and aluminum, for example. And that resulted in the Federal Reserve in 2022 raising interest rates, and that has sent manufacturing activity straight down. So now manufacturing activity is in a deep recession in the U.S. This chart shows imported steel, and it shows how we are importing less steel pre the tariff in 2018. It rebounded a bit from, but we have less steel coming into the U.S. today than we did before the steel tariff. Now that would be a problem if we're making more steel. But the problem is we're making less steel than we did before the steel tariff. So we're making less steel and we're importing less steel. Okay, that's how you end up having a steel shortage, and that has driven up. This is a really critical chart. This shows the price of steel around the world going back to 2002. The dark blue line is the price of the steel in the United States. The light blue line is the price in Europe, and then this kind of pink line is the world price, and then the China's at the very bottom. And you can see that the stratospheric increase in the price of steel. When the tariff was first announced, we had that peak there in 2020, which is U.S. FOB mill price. That price was just as the tariff was being announced. As the trade war went into effect, we drove the price down. Then COVID shot the price back up. Now, the two takeaways from this slide is one: when you have super high prices for material for steel, you get material substitution, and so you instead of using steel, you might use concrete if you're in construction, for example. You might switch to aluminum. You switch to other materials. When your price is way high relative to the rest of the world, what happens in manufacturing is your factories move. So one of my former employers, Chemical Automotive, they shut down their factory in Ohio, 650 jobs, and moved to Mexico. Because if you go to Mexico, you can buy steel at 40% below the U.S. price, as long as you turn it with $3 an hour labor. As long as you turn it into products and ship it to the U.S., you pay no tariff. So this tariff was done all along. You should have put the tariff on products made out of steel coming into the U.S. so that users of steel at my company would be more competitive, and I'm the one who's buying American-made steel. Instead, this is a policy that encourages me to shut my factory down, leave the office staff here, move the factory to Mexico, and make my products there. And that's happening in my industry. Where did the steel? This chart shows the yearly profits for the 3 largest pure play steel producers, and you can see the giant jump in the last 2 years. Don't feel bad about the 1 year where they lost some money, felt that they were dragged down by U.S. Steel, which is integrated. They have integrated mills, which are less efficient than the mini mills. Where we are now, the steel tariff still exists. During the Trump years, they abandoned the tariff from Canada and Mexico in order to get NAFTA 2.0 passed. And then President Biden in the fall of 21, actually I was here in Chicago in Cormac, being interviewed at FabTech, which is Mindshi's largest trade show, on the day that the Biden administration came out and said that they would replace this, they would allow a certain amount of steel coming into the country, and then beyond that amount, the tariff would kick in. And on that day, I said we had hit the top of the market. That was a big peak that we saw, $2,400 a ton. And so that has helped to bring down the price of steel. But as you can see, we're still very high relative to the past in other countries. The last thing I want to say is, how is this affected me, my company? And you know, I'm the sole owner, so I have to be the banker for my business. And to give you a sense, it has personally cost me roughly $2 million to keep my factory going, because I couldn't pass on all these steel price increases. We had 21 consecutive price increases for steel between the fall of 2020 and the fall of 2021. Each one was 10 to 30%. If gasoline had gone up as much as my steel price had gone up, we'd be paying around $16 a gallon for gasoline. So I've had to subsidize my customers' purchase of my products in order to keep my manufacturing operations in the U.S. I had to lay off some of my non-production staff. I had to defer investments in my company, and I missed the opportunity to lock in low interest rates on our corporate finance because my banks didn't feel that we were strong enough to refinance our debt. And this kind of stuff, as you can imagine, makes me livid, because all I want to do is employ people and make stuff in the United States. Okay, I'd be happy to take questions. Don't be shy.
So I noticed on your charts, the price of steel goes up and down constantly. It just goes up and down more in the United States. What's the solution that would help your company?
What would have been better is first to put tariff on products made out of steel coming into the United States, so U.S. users of steel would be more competitive. Okay, if the steel makers are complaining about low profitability, do what the rest of the world does. Treat them like farmers. Give them price reports. Okay, but we have no mechanism in place other than the President of the United States saying that the steel tariff is over. We have no mechanism for any of this. A steel tariff. What we need is a president there that says, look, we are damaging U.S. manufacturing because U.S. manufacturers that use steel employ 50 times more people than work at steel mills. So we are losing the customer base with steel mills. So the answer to your question is, I would put the tariff on products made out of steel coming in the U.S., or I would issue subsidies to steel mills to help make them solid at times of low prices.
So I'm not as smart as you, I'm just smaller, but I do understand there's steel and there's steel. And what I mean by that, there's high performance steel for example, use in space during extreme conditions, but there's also steel that will put on a railroad track. What is the big volume consumption of steel in the US? Is it infrastructure, and is there an area just to focus on that, to get focus on the volume, or what is your solution?
Well, you know, that's a great question. The way things are headed right now is that the steel industry is gonna turn into, like the Defense Department, they're gonna be government contractors, because our prices are whacked with the rest of the world, and the federal government can mandate American-made steel, and expects the taxpayer to pay more for it. So we're gonna lose a good chunk of our private sector. The other thing that's happening is the higher value added forms of steel, the mills are reconfiguring themselves around that, and they're abandoning the lower grades of steel. As far as the segments that use the most amount of steel, certainly vehicle production, steel bodies on cars and trucks, etc. And also the construction industry, steel is a key raw material. Roads and bridges for structural steel, those are the segments we see the most usage of steel.
Are there other raw input materials like steel that have experienced sort of a similar type of situation with tariffs or?
Well, that's a great question. When this was presented to the public, they also, the Trump administration wanted to put a tariff on aluminum because and so there was a 10%. The aluminum industry said, please don't do this. This is going to hurt our customers and eventually hurt our business. So they wanted a 0% tariff. Trump wanted a 25% tariff, so they ended up with a 10% tariff. And the reason why I think that was important is they didn't want to make it too obvious what the heck they were really doing here. So we needed a decoy. Remember that movie Spies Like Us? Well, the aluminum industry was the decoy for the steel tariff. Okay, one more question.
Have you written any books or information?
And actually, if you Google my name in steel, you'll see two things. An article I wrote for my industry trade magazine called The Fabricator, where I walk through this history. And then also on YouTube from McCormick in September 2021, there was an interview of me done at our industry's trade show.
And there's a corollary to that. Would you recommend anybody else that we should read or?
Well, I think this whole thing, the first segment of our presentation on the macroeconomics, I think it'd be fascinating to maybe bring in, you get a lot of great universities here in Chicago, bring in an economics professor and just have him talk about that macroeconomic slide that I have to help further embellish, some of the points of that. Because, we really, look, no one party's got it all the answers. The fact that the problem in our country is we need to take some of the ideas from the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, put them together, find a middle ground, and solve problems. And we're in a hell of a mess right now where we can't get either side working together. Why can't you get them working together? Because it's not in their financial interest. You take any issue, abortion, gun control, they probably sit at a table and say, which side are you going to take? Okay, you can raise a bunch of money. I'm going to take the other side and we'll raise a bunch of money. Okay? And so it's all about raising money and not solving problems for the American people.
Any questions in the Zoom chat? No? Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming in and here's some other. We are supporting House Cookie Mix and so Alvin Green started House Cookie Mix to start a company to help his autistic son and his friends to have jobs once they age out of the school system, which is at 20 years old in Chicago. They age out of the system and then there's nowhere for them to go. So he started this wonderful cookie company to give them jobs. And if anyone needs the QR code, you get 10% off the cookies. And they're personally made cookies. You can pick your base, you pick what goes in it, and it becomes your own cookie. The cookies that they put there are not chocolate, cream, and purple cookie. Which is anyone who came to my installation, that's it. Yeah. So thank you so much.
I will really treasure this because I know where the Rotary Club of Chicago is. Thank you.
Okay, so at this time, we have any visiting international tournaments in the room?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Ed Squareway. I'm from Gloucester in England, coming over to visit Chicago, and I thought I'd come along and visit Rotary One. My daughter is currently here, works for Aon, so she's on a 2-year secondment working in the building. It's not very far away on some US business. So I've come over with my family, my other daughter and her boyfriend to visit my oldest daughter, Emily. So greetings from Gloucester, England. So I'm actually the past president of one of the 4 Rotary clubs in Gloucester. So we're Rotary at Kingsholm, which is part of one of the deprived areas of Gloucester. It's probably one of the worst deprived areas actually in the country. So we're supporting local schools there and other activities. Do you want me to describe more of what we actually get up to? Yeah, so the last year I organised a sort of a jazz evening, so we raised money for a leukemia and chemotherapy charity that operates out of Gloucester Royal Hospital, which is where my wife works. She works in the pharmacy department as a pharmacy technician. This year the president has got a major project on hand, which is to increase the number of defibrillators publicly available in the city of Gloucester. So recently Sharp has done. So Gloucester, I suppose, is about 120,000, 130,000 people. It currently has 3 publicly available defibrillators, where if you compare that to a town just up the road, which is Worcester, they've got 203, and Birmingham, which is a much bigger city, I know has got over 900. So what we want to do is actually increase the number of defibrillators publicly available in the city, because a lot of them are actually locked away in buildings that are only actually available when the building is being used, sort of like a football club or a golf club or something like that. We also do a talking newspaper for a blind, so where we actually read the news and send out USB sticks to registered blind people within the city every week, so that they can actually get the news. So that's been going for several years. So we do quite a lot in the community, and so greetings from Rotary at Kingston. Thank you very much.
Hello, friends. My name is Marisela Paris Uribe, and I'm the past president of the San Diego Downtown Union Rotary Club. Also, I've been helping our governor nominee with our district. We're visiting clubs in Mexico and in Ensenada, Rosarito, Tijuana, and we've been visiting clubs to help them join binacional projects with them. And yes, and I'm a parent of 4 children, and my daughter right now at this moment is doing her bar exam, and today and tomorrow, and she will be working with Marshall at Michael Best starting in September. And actually, she met Marshall during our Rotary meeting when we came and visited last year. And it was just a coincidence. We were in a table with the professor that is sitting at that table, and she was asking us, "What are you guys doing?" And my daughter, I said, "Oh, I'm the president of the San Diego." And my daughter mentioned that she was a student, 3rd-year law. And then she says, "Hey, what are you doing?" She said, "Oh, I'm doing my internship this summer." And when, "Oh," she says, "I'm starting Monday." And the professor asked her where, and she says, "Oh, she's going to do it with Michael Best." And Marshall was sitting at our table, so it was just a fun to mention, because I went to tell the story to my friends in Rotary.
My name's Dave Bowman. I went to the Aurora, Colorado Gateway Rotary Club, Friday Breakfast Club. Out of Denver, Colorado area, so that's District 5450. If you ever swing by Mile High City, come see us. I currently roll in my 5th year as our District Rotary Foundation Chair. And so our foundation is one of my passions, and we have a great team. In fact, our team is so good and passionate about it. Most of us have been kind of rotate in a circle like the Rotary wheel. Different parts of that Rotary Foundation team. So we're really excited. We actually just coming off of basically, if you look at about a 380-day period, we just became $1 million district. So for the first time. So it's been a long slog to get to that point. So my passion in Rotary, Polio Plus is a big, huge thing for me. So we do a lot of fundraising and such for that, and then also mental health. I'm recently connecting with the new Rotary Mental Health Online Club, which is a really neat initiative. And I try to do those things in our district as well. We have a nice Rotarians for Mental Health group that does a lot of that process. So welcome, happy to be here. I'm here for the Homeland Security Conference at the hiding off of the river. And no, I'm more of a vendor, and then my wife is actually one of the secret agents.
Good afternoon, Sharon Sullivan with Rotary Club of Metro New York City. I've actually been overseas for the last 9 years in Togo and Namibia, working as a direct hire for the United States Peace Corps. Our general counsel had decided it was a conflict of interest for me to be a member of a host country club while I was a direct hire. So I maintained my membership with Metro New York City, had previously been supporting them virtually and financially through the Rotary Foundation. Former ambassador of Scholar through the Rotary Foundation, I believe deeply in the foundation and the work that it does. So I suppose I know Brian knows that at least my money is going towards a good cause, and I am just transitioning out of working full-time for Peace Corps, and will hopefully be joining a local Rotary Club wherever I land in the world. So it's always great to be back here. I was a member of Rotary One for many, many years. Thank you for having me.
Hola. Konnichiwa. Guten Tag. I've been in the Rotary family my whole life. I received a scholarship to study in Japan when I was 17, and that turned into 3 years. I didn't want to come back, and one of my host fathers hired me because of my Japanese. I ended up getting a degree in chemistry and Japanese from UW-Madison, and currently I'm an anthropologist, and I do art therapy with children who have experienced severe trauma because of gun violence on the south side of Chicago. Ooh, I'm nervous, excuse me. I'm so happy to be here. I'm thankful for all of you. I appreciate it. Can I sit down? Yes. Okay. I'm pregnant. That's a long story. Rotary opened my eyes, opened my heart, opened my universe. I ended up marrying a man from Busan who was adopted by Germans. So I am Dr. Merschberger. Yeah, Ethan Merschberger. Today is Emily Hill's 82nd birthday. I don't know if you all were aware. I brought snacks from Japan. And I brought our speaker, who, can I say, I have an uncle who loves steel. He's an artist. He's a steel artist. Like he makes sculptures in steel. And he follows, like, so out of all of it, I came on purpose. And I did take many economic classes at Madison, and you were much better. So I thank you. I would just like to share with the president. I did bring, my husband and I have stock in a honey company in New Zealand. It's called Macuna Honey. This is for you. And this is for the president. And then this is my favorite candy from Japan. My question to you is, what do you do for fun?
I run a factory.
And I brought everyone to try. This is I fell in love with the second day I was in Japan. I had a very amazing experience. I lived with 2 indigenous Japanese families. I knew. There's they want their land back. These people, they're mostly located in Hokkaido. With Oh, no, two passports out. I thought I got two, okay. Oh, and, so I'm a songwriter, I read poetry too. When I was in Japan, I've always written songs and poetry and, anyway, I had a song that went to the top 10 in Japan. And I've written books in other languages. I just had my first book come out in English last year. Yeah, so Paul Harris is one of my heroes. And him I see a visionary and a person who, his legacy, like I thank Paul Harris, I do. And also all of us here is so important, especially for the world the way it is. I'm on my way to the Gambia. I was invited to the Gambia by the University of the Gambia, and I'll be going to Abuja, Lagos, Accra, and I am a DJ. That's what I do. My husband and I have a show in Korea. It's called The Hong Family, and hopefully he's a computer engineer for Amazon Web Services, and I'm an anthropologist by day and by night we both DJs. So that's the shtick. God bless all of you. Thank you for all you do. Yeah, I'm also I accept Rachel, our family. I'm Welsh. I'm Armenian. I'm Igbo from Nigeria. My name is Igbo, which means blessing in Yoruba, but I'm Igbo. I'm also Ga. And Algonquin poem, my grandmother was a reservation Indian from Prince George's County, Maryland. Grew up from the Tulsa Plantation. And there's a movie. Oh, there's a movie about my family, Beth. It's a good movie. I'm not trying to be like, oh, it's a good movie. It's called The Great Debaters. And it's about my father's uncle. So Denzel Washington plays my dad's uncle.
That's awesome. Any friends in Rotary? We have two at the.
Yeah, I invited two guests. Vernon Abel is the president of Cooper Steel Wire. They're a wire supplier. They're a distributor, so, as beaten up on the steel mill, wasn't beaten up on the. And also, Jonathan is a member of the national.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, so our opportunities that we have is this Wednesday, July 26th at Cornerstone, where we will make or serve dinners to the homeless and eat in the Chicago area. Please sign up for that, because I believe at the moment we only have one person signed up. I want us to have a better Rotary presence than that. Then we have the Fifth Third Bike to Drive on September 3rd. We need you to register to volunteer by August 1st. And they have the first one signed up, so
It's only one, Alita, I'd like to say.
here at 5:30 in the morning, I'll be
I've
there.
already got one person on board, who just haven't signed up yet.
I mean, frankly, if we don't get more for that, I'm gonna have to go back and tell them that we can't do it. But I'm not even joking. So we need, if we're gonna do it, we need to do it.
Bring a friend.
You don't know, nobody's biking. Nobody is riding a bike. We are handing out drinks at the rest stop. That's it. Nobody's the only thing I'm asking you is to get up there. You gotta register. People told me, oh, register. No, see that? I need you to register. And then your name is official. Don't just tell me. So let's call Margaret.
All right, and then our upcoming meetings and events, the Rotary Club of Joliet is hosting its 110th anniversary. So let's go out and celebrate them being in Rotary for 110 years. We have our Now facility tour on August 1st. On August 8th, we have our Job 1 Awards and Appreciation Banquet. Please come out and participate in great students and scholarship. And then there's also lunch with our President Gordon McKinney. For us to register and go to. We would love for our wonderful members to join a committee and help us grow and do wonderful things here in the club. And at this time, if I could have Janet come up and lead us in the 4-way test.
everyone to please stand.
Thank you for saying that. It's to all rise. Before we test the things we can't say and do, number one. Number two. Number three. Number four.
Number 5, will it be fun? All right, with that, I adjourn our meeting. Well, how are you?